Well, welcome to our first presentation of this, the Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis / Thrive retreat. The presentation that Natasha and I have been starting off with for 4 years now, 40 plus presentations, is a presentation around understanding and navigating a religious transition. So this presentation is to help you orient where you've been, where you are, and where you're going, okay? It's not meant to be the gospel, but I think it does a good job of helping orient you. So it's kind of like a roadmap. Is that all right? Okay. The main thing we want to get across in this presentation is that a faith crisis is not some terrible, personal, awful, horrible thing that has happened to you as a victim, okay? What we want to convey in this presentation is that you're going through a universal experience that life intended you. And I would even argue that religion intended you to go through. So you're not victims. I loved what was said yesterday about, or maybe it was on a podcast I was listening to, where the victim stance is the weakest stance. Like, there are victims in the world. We've all been victims. But you don't want to assume the stance of a victim as your approach to life. You want to approach life as an empowered, informed, powerful human being. And the way to do that is to move from a place of victimhood to a place of empowerment. And that's kind of what this presentation is intended to do.
And what to add to this is that it's hugely developmental, and we are ongoingly developmental creatures. We know a lot about development until the age of like 15, 16 as a lay audience, but development continues into adulthood. So your 20s have certain developmental steps, your 30s have certain developmental steps. It doesn't escape my notice that most of the people we work with are somewhat in the midlife arena. And so that's a very huge part of your developmental journey, is to start questioning where you come from. That's a normal thing to be doing.
Yep.
I also want to just say that this whole presentation comes from a social science hat. So we are not here talking about religion as Mormons or non-Mormons. We're talking about
theologians.
Or theologians. We're talking about this from human behavior and what we understand about social science. So things that we'll say are hard sometimes for us to hear, even myself, when I put on my religious lens. But right now I'm coming at it from a social hat lens.
Thank you. That's really important. So if you can, take off your theological and religious lens.
Like we would say this to anyone.
Yeah.
Catholics, Jews, atheists, same concepts.
Okay, so here is my / our best attempt at explaining what you are all going through. As conscious, intelligent human creatures, we have advanced brains, which means we have the capacity for certain things that your average animal just doesn't have the capacity for, and certainly not plants, right? We have the capacity for self-awareness. We have the capacity to gather data and information and to make sense of that information. We have the capacity to have complex thoughts. We have the capacity for complex emotions, sophisticated emotions. And we have the capacity for complex behaviors and relationships and social structures and civilizations. That's what separates us, I believe, from the rest of the living creatures on the earth. It's this big, sophisticated brain. It's no accident that it takes 18 years to nurture a human into adulthood. There's no other mammal that takes 18 years to nurture their offspring into adulthood.
And we now know it's 26 years, actually, until your brain stops developing.
Yeah.
And just think about that for a minute, because most of your big decisions were done before 26.
That's right. That's brilliant.
Including who you're probably partnered with.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yep. Yeah, and what education you pursue, what career path you pursue. You made all those decisions before your brain was fully developed.
Probably had some babies even.
Yeah. So it takes 26 years for your brain to get fully developed. It takes at least 18 years for you to be considered an independent legal adult. That's because it takes that long for your brains to get to their mature stage. Because our brains are so dang sophisticated, right? So if you couple a sophisticated brain, sophisticated emotions, sophisticated intellectual capacity with the reality that this life is rife with war and famine and catastrophe and death and poverty and loss and grief, that is a horrible combination. Because now we can sit and feel and think and ruminate for our entire lives on how much suffering there is in our individual life and in the collective existence, right? And we're relatively limited in our power to do anything about it or to even understand it. And so we sit here with these really deep, intense existential questions that you can't imagine a kitten or a puppy or a monkey asking themselves questions like, who am I? Why do I exist? Where did I come from? What is the purpose of this life? Why do I feel so lonely and awful? Will I ever be loved? How should I behave? What's ethical and moral behavior? Why is there so much suffering in this life? When I die, is that the end? After death, will I ever see my loved ones again? Will I even exist? And how can I feel safe in a life that feels sometimes so horrible? Do you guys get the conflict? Do you get the problem? This is the problem of the human condition. Like, it wasn't a problem necessarily when we were cavemen and women, when we didn't have language, when we didn't have ways to kind of really develop complex thoughts. But now in 2019, we have all that. And why is depression and anxiety and even self-harm and suicide higher than it's ever been? The more sophisticated we get, the more capable we are of seeing how incredibly awful life can actually be.
This is so optimistic.
So, where do religions come from? This is the soil of religion. Okay? From a social science perspective, as Natasha is careful to remind us, religion emerges as mankind's attempt to grapple and answer these questions, to grapple with and answer these questions.
And what's really interesting about this is that the research used to think that religion started with agriculture. In other words, you want the food to grow, and so you ask for some type of help. And now there's quite a bit of data showing that actually religion goes way back beyond agriculture, which means that really it wasn't about things growing, it was about these existential questions that started becoming complex for people.
So when you think about Mormonism, as wonderful as that slide may be for you right now, or as triggering as that slide may be for you right now, I believe that Mormonism, like every major world religion, begins in that same way, where its founder was grappling with life's most difficult questions. If you know anything about the life of Joseph Smith, what was he worrying about? He was worrying about poverty of his family. He was worrying about death of some of his siblings, of his brother Alvin, right? He was worrying about what will happen in the next life. His parents were arguing about religion. His dad was more of a universalist, but his mom was more of a traditional Protestant Christian. Will we see Alvin again? Will my parents both make it to heaven? Will I make it to heaven? Will our family be together, right? Those were all the central questions of what Joseph Smith was grappling with. And we kind of miss that in the whitewash narrative that we are given as Orthodox Mormons. And so, you can see the emergence of Mormonism immediately after Alvin dies, right? Which not only caused Joseph to wonder if he'd ever see Alvin again, because Alvin wasn't born with he didn't have a baptism, right? So is Joseph going to see Alvin again? And then this burned over district in New York, you've got all these religions arguing saying you got to have a Presbyterian baptism. No, you got to have a Methodist baptism. No, you've got to have a born-again baptism, right? And you have all these religions arguing and saying, this is the way you get to heaven. That's the way to get to heaven. And it's super stressful. And so I believe, love or hate Joseph Smith, what he created was born out of sincere questions and concern about the fate of himself, of his family, and ultimately of the human race.
And within a context of Christianity that was very rigid, very black and white, very much, listening to the idea that Alvin was in hell. I have several stories in my own background of babies that didn't make it to their baptismal blessing because of, weather or death, and those babies are in purgatory forever, according to many traditions. So you have to put it into context of the types of things that they were really worried about.
So, regardless of which version of the first vision you buy into, kind of on the left-hand side, the traditional version of the first vision, the, I guess, 1838 version of the first vision, or the multiple other versions, what we can all agree upon is that what emerged from Mormonism was a set of teachings and practices that helped address these fundamental existential questions. A theology and a set of behavioral rules, right? And if you think about these awful existential questions that we're grappling with, and then you lay over that the plan of salvation, you realize that the plan of salvation literally answers every single one of these questions. And if you don't believe me, let's do a test. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Okay. Who am I? Say it.
Sons and daughters of God.
Sons and daughters of God. Why do I exist? Happy, to have joy, to be exalted, to return to our Heavenly Father, right?
Your body.
Where did I come from? We were all spirits with the loving Heavenly Father and Mother in the pre-existence, right? What is the purpose of life? It's a test and it's a trial to help us thrive and return to live with our Heavenly Father again, right? Why do we feel lonely?
We're in the lone and dreary world.
It's the lone and dreary world. It was designed this way to be a what? And if you are lonely, what's the reason for that? Sin. You're not righteous enough. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? Will I ever be loved?
Yeah.
You are absolutely loved. You are wholly and unconditionally loved by heavenly parents that adore you. They know everything about you, and they love every piece of you, right? And if you're lucky, you have loving earthly parents who also love you and adore you. How should I behave? Keep the commandments.
Lots.
Don't drink coffee. Don't drink tea. Don't drink alcohol. Don't smoke. Go to church. Read your scripture. Say your prayers,
Make
right?
bread.
Go to the temple. Do the ordinances. Go on a mission. I think
Clean the church.
clean the church. Like, if of all these things, I think how we should behave is where Mormonism shines the best.
Love our neighbor.
Love your neighbor. All that stuff, right? Why is there suffering in this life?
To teach
It's a
us.
test. It helps us growth. It helps us. What's that, Donna? It's for our good. It's for our experience. It's like a laboratory. It's like a school. When I die, is that the end?
No.
Oh no. No. You will live on forever in joy and happiness and peace and love and glory. After death, will I see my loved ones again? That's probably the most important teaching, well, the most influential teaching in Mormonism, right? And that's why missionaries lead with that. It's like, doot. Do you want to live with your family in heaven? We've got the answer, right? So that's it. Do you guys see how religion is like custom designed to resolve the existential crisis of the human existence? That's where it, from a social science perspective, emerges from. And so we enter into an agreement. We all entered into an agreement. How many of you were converts to the church? Okay, maybe a fifth of you or a tenth of you. You entered into this agreement too. And this was the agreement. We, the Mormon Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we will offer you an identity so that you know who you are. We will give you a sense of meaning and purpose in this life. We will tell you, we will give you friends, immediate friends. We will give you an immediate community. We will nurture and support your family. We will help strengthen your marriage. We will give you a source of unending spirituality, and we will give you a sense of morality. We will tell you how to live, how to be moral, how to be good, and how to, live the best life possible. And all we ask in return is a 2-year mission, 10% of your income for the rest of your life, and 3 to 10 years of service on average per week.
3 to 10 hours.
What did I say?
Years.
3 to 10 hours a week for the rest of your life. Your full unquestioning commitment and devotion, exact obedience. We get your children as a part of the deal, right? And you have to limit your relationships to only safe people.
And it also requires like certain parameters. Like when we say we're going to support your marriage, it's only if you're in a heterosexual marriage.
Yeah, there are rules. Now, normally that second column elicits a huge laugh from the audience. I think this is the first time the audience didn't erupt in laughter. Can you imagine? Why does that second column usually elicit such laughter?
It's a lot.
That's a lot. That's a big ask. 10% of your income for the rest of your life? Your children? Like unquestioning commitment and devotion and blind obedience? But here's the thing, right? Most people think that's a huge bargain. And how can that be? How can it be that such an amazing, phenomenal, gargantuan, unreasonable ask of exact obedience, unlimited commitment and devotion, your children, 10% of your income till you die, how can anyone feel like that's a bargain? We have our hand raised. We remember the rules? Remember the rule? Wait, do you remember the rule?
It's just a one-liner.
That's
it's
right.
For eternity. It's your ticket to happiness for eternity.
That's right.
Okay, and let me ask you guys to stand up when you talk so that Clint will be able to get you on the camera. Thank you. We're learning as we go.
Yes.
Yes. The reason why it's a bargain is because if you don't have that, guess where you are? You're back here. And guess what? That's why you're all here today.
Does this feel very good
Because you're back here.
to be in this place?
You're back here, aren't you? Aren't you back here right now?
In a lot of ways.
In a lot of ways. Maybe not in every way, but in a lot of ways, you're back here. And so as angry as we are at Mormonism maybe, or at the church, or as much as we hate religion sometimes, right? What we forget is that it offers us something very valuable. Because when we're here, you can get stuck here and your life can end here.
A Catholic poet, theologian calls this the dark night of the soul. The dark night of the soul.
We need someone to shuffle a microphone around.
I would say being back there, I love being back there.
Sure.
Because that means I'm free. That means I'm not being manipulated. And while I think you're correct that religion takes advantage of the fact that as humans we have these questions, I guess for me, I don't ascribe it such a great motive.
Okay, can I just say we're going to get there? You're jumping ahead. I love it that you're getting to the end at the beginning. What you're saying is that this is a huge gift, and that's how this presentation is going to end. But can you relate to feeling this way? Because what led you to join the church in the first place?
I think part of it was the age. I was 18, and so that's an age where you're just trying to figure out your life. And
you need meaning, right?
I would also say...
Can I pause you? You wanted identity. You wanted a sense of meaning.
I wanted a sense of purpose.
You wanted a sense of purpose.
But I think there's also an aspect of, as a woman, while this wasn't a conscious thought then, when you sort of survey the world as a woman, you have to make a choice of where are you going to be the safest.
Yeah, you wanted safe.
And while this may sound crude a little bit, for many women, they would rather, we would rather, because I chose this, we would rather be beholden to one man than be subjected to attacks by multiple men. And so, the woman who chooses purposefully to go in and give up who she is as part of the bargain, part of what she's getting back that you don't have on that list is protection and safety from how the world is towards women. And what we get in return, which is still dangerous, is what is like pedestal treatment, right?
Yeah.
Look at our wonderful women. They're holy. They don't need the priesthood because they're already so wonderful. And all of this talk of like how great women are, and yet inside we know we must not be that great.
Can we give her applause? That's beautiful. So beautiful. Before you respond, I just want to say that was beautiful. That was important. That was very powerful. When we write this, I think we have written this at least in part with what you're saying in mind. Because when you talk about friends and community, when we talk about family and marriage, when we talk about morality, meaning, purpose, identity, all those things serve a protective function. And so, yes, what I love is that you added a really important feminist perspective to what we're talking about here. But I do think we're kind of at least overlapping in what we're saying in many areas, because I do think the church ultimately provides you protection in a scary world. And that's what we're trying to get at with those red questions, right? The world is scary. Religions provide protection at a cost.
Another thing that I would say about this presentation is that what we're talking about today could easily be covered in a full semester of real in-depth study. And so it's going to be somewhat generalized, and it is going to obviously miss a lot of like more intricate details of how this affects issues of gender, issues of orientation, issues of sexuality, issues of personalities.
Of belief.
Yeah. There's just, because we are so wide, in our ability to be human. So bear with us a little bit that this is a very generalized presentation, even though it's the longest part of our presentation. And we've always talked about how to make it shorter, and yet it is so complex. So we appreciate you bringing your complexity to it because it is complex, and yet just understand that there is some limitations to this presentation, obviously.
We had a hand right here.
My position is that I still hold that it's a hell of a bargain. If, and that's the key word for me, if it's true, then it's a hell of a bargain. If it's legitimate, I still hold it's a great bargain. If it's a fabrication and you can't deliver on what you proclaim or promise, then all of a sudden the bargain isn't that great anymore. It changes dramatically.
Yeah. Let's give it. So there's a really important presentation that a friend, Dr. Dave Christian, gave in a Mormon Stories podcast episode back in 2011 in New York, where he talked about, I would say you have half of the equation right, Carl. Validity is really important, whether the church is true or not, but also utility is also very important. In other words, does the church make you happy? And there are actually some people that don't care a whit about whether it's true. See, that's a value that you have, that I have, that many of us in this room have. We care about validity. We care about truth. There's another whole value that someone can have, which is, does it work for me? Does it make me happy? Does it help me in my marriage? Does it help me raise kids? And you will be able to find a whole host of Mormons. You could talk to them about Peepstones and Book of Abraham and Fanny Alger until they're blue in the face. They won't care for 3 seconds because they're like, will it help me in my marriage? Will it help me be happier? Will it help me raise my kids? I don't care about anything else. And so there's the validity and the utility part
And that's why you see many people in transition either, again, this is a simplification, but either it's history concerns or it's social justice concerns. So you might have a family who finds it very utilitarian until they have a gay child. And now all of a sudden, the one thing that was really important to them now doesn't fit with their values or family experience.
And truth becomes, one of you said it last night, truth becomes the way you feel good about leaving the church because you're upset that your gay child is being hurt. And so the historical stuff isn't what got you out. It was the social justice stuff that got you out. And it was the history that just made you feel better about your decision to leave.
Somebody said
Does that make sense? That was you, yeah.
Yes.
There's another hand. Yes, we need a microphone runner. Yes.
You're doing such a good
Thank
job.
you.
Young men, thank you.
Sorry, I chose him. Sorry. I would say that my experience speaks to the utility of the church because I was raised in a part-member family. My stepfather was an atheist. Home was very tumultuous and was very unhealthy for me. And so the one place that I found safety was at church and knowing that these people love me, even though I don't fit their mold exactly. But it was the one place that was calm, that I could find peace, that I found some sort of solace from the turmoil that was my life. And it led me, all my siblings left the church when they were teenagers except me, and I was always the sheep, the follower. But for me, it gave me a focus that was good, and it led me to my husband, which from my background, having a marriage like I have is unheard of. Like, I never saw this. The first 7 years of our marriage, I was waiting for him to tell me he was gay or for the shoe to drop or for him to die because good marriages don't happen. Right? And so that's what that gave me, was that utility. It gave me what I have.
And Mormonism created him.
Exactly. And so,
so
to let that go is like, I'm not sure how to do that.
Yeah.
Because then what does that mean for my children?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what this whole weekend's about.
And that's a wonderful irony that
Can we
John
give her
just-
applause
yeah.
really quick?
It's a wonderful irony what he brings up is that, I've worked with a lot of different people in my life coming from all different kinds of cultures and religions, and my favorite people are Mormon people. So as upset as we are about our, heritage and the betrayals, it does create a phenomenal group of people.
I mean, aren't we amazing? I mean, really. Objectively,
I think we're pretty awesome. And I will also say, I'll just second that, so I work a lot with John DeLynn with Mormon Stories Retreats, but I also work a lot with Dan Witherspoon and Mormon Matters Retreats. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Dan Witherspoon, but he tries to do the more nuanced approach to Mormonism, people who want to stay. And so people who usually show up at his retreats tend to be people that are still active, maybe mixed faith marriages, those kinds of things. And this is wide sweeping. This is not like official research I've done. But I will say this, that I have noticed anecdotally that at the Mormon Stories retreats, there's a lot more anger and there's a lot more people that come from very functional black and white Mormon families. Okay, so they were rigid, but they were loving and they were supportive. The people who are at the Mormon Matters retreats come from the hippie families, inactive families, alcoholic families, military families like mine, where the church did have a very functional approach, and they're less likely to care about the history. So that's just my experience with two different populations of faith transitioners.
So one of the things we want to communicate is something that people hate to hear, especially ex-Mormons and secular people, and people get mad at me for when I say it, but I think religion is a bargain given the alternative of nothing. I think religion is better than nothing. That as much damage as it can cause, it would be worse to have nothing. It's kind of like, this is a horrible analogy, but it's like Iraq. Yeah, it was awful to have a dictator, but look what happened when we got rid of him, right? Would you rather live in a tyranny or an anarchy? Personally, I'd rather live in a tyranny because at least there's order and structure. And so, and by the way, there's a lot more wonderful things about Mormonism than that. And so I'm using kind of stark comparisons.